been with us the last month or so, you know that we have been in a series called The Parables of Jesus. And when we've been looking at a variety of parables, these short stories that Jesus tells, and Jesus uses parables as a way to reach our hearts and to reach our minds and to reach our imaginations to understand the depth of the reality that the God of the universe knows us and loves us and calls us towards him. And so Jesus uses parables as a means to help us understand who he is and what it means to know him and what it means to be people that follow him and what it means to walk and be part of his kingdom. And this morning we're going to look at a parable that comes from the book of Luke chapter 14. And the purpose of this parable, of why Jesus is teaching it, is what Jesus wants us to do this morning, is he wants to have us examine ourselves. And he wants us to think about how do we view ourselves and how do we view and value other people. That's the point of our next 30 minutes. That's the conversation Jesus is going to pull us into. How do you view yourself? And how do you view and value others around you? So if you have a Bible and you want to follow along, we're going to be in Luke chapter 14 this morning. The verses, as always, will be on the screen. Not as always. Our normal TV broke, and so this is the school's TV that Jared found in the back. It is much bigger. Your eyes are not deceiving you. It's solid. So we got lucky with our backup TV. So we do have verses on this giant screen. If you still can't read the verses, maybe your eyes are the problem and not the size of our television. Okay, Luke chapter 14. We're going to start in verse 1. It says, one Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling of his body. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in the law, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? I'm going to pause there. I'm going to set the table a little bit. This is a moment where if you've ever been to like a dinner with people and it feels awkward in the room and you're like, what's going on that I'm not sure? What happened behind the scenes? This is one of those moments. So I want to fill you in on what's happening behind the scenes in this moment that Jesus is having dinner, and it becomes apparent this is not a normal dinner. Jesus is being carefully watched, it says. And so Jesus is recognizing pretty quickly that this Pharisee, this prominent leader in the church, remember Pharisees were the religious teachers. They were the experts in all the things of the Bible. And this was a prominent one, right? So this is the leader among leaders. He invites Jesus and his disciples to come and eat. So they come and eat, but they're like, this doesn't feel like a normal dinner because I'm being watched. And now you just paraded somebody in front of me who is suffering. And they're watching to see what I'm going to do. See, what the Pharisees were trying to do is they're trying to trap Jesus. They want him to mess up. They want him to do something wrong. Because the minute he does something wrong, they can use that to discredit his reputation, and they can use that as a means to get him arrested and to have him killed. The Pharisees were plotting to have Jesus killed. From the very beginning, Jesus had conflict with the religious leaders. And for Jesus, his conflict really centered on two major issues. The first major issue involved how the Pharisees were building a community of people around God. See, in the beginning, in the first 5 books of the Bible, we call that the Torah. You've heard the Torah. That's the first 5 books of the Bible. That's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's called the Torah. And that was what the Jewish people had. And in the Torah were over 600 commands of God. And those commands were meant to reveal God's heart to the people. It was meant to reveal who God is, and it was meant to help us understand this is what it looks like to live as God is calling us to live. This is what it looks like to bring God's love and mercy and justice and righteousness into the world. That God is telling us through his commands that if you live this way, this is a life of freedom, this is the life of joy, this is a life of satisfaction and significance. This was the purpose of all of God's commands, to reveal his heart and to help us understand how do we live in a manner to bring his love, his justice into this world. That's what it was meant to be. The Pharisees started by saying, okay, we're going to take those 600 commands and we're going to devote our lives to doing all of these perfectly, which is impossible. But then they started doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. And they said, you know what? It's not enough. It's not enough, these 600 commands, so we're going to add hundreds and hundreds of rules and regulations on top of it. And this is where Jesus started having an issue with the people. because they took God's heart and God's intent for his commands, and they divorced them out of all these rules and regulations they made. So instead of building a community of people who are seeking to know God more and who are seeking to understand what does it mean to know God and follow God and love God and be loved by God, what the Pharisees had created was a community of people that were just really good rule followers. They didn't know anything about God. That had been separated out. God's heart and intent for his commands was removed from it. And so all they knew is we're supposed to be good rule followers, and when we're not, we're bad, and if we are, we're good, and we need to check these boxes, and it had become a religion of rules. And so Jesus had a major issue with that. The best illustration of this reality, which is really relevant to our conversation this morning, is when you think of the command of the Sabbath. The Sabbath was something that was meant to be a gift to us. It was meant to be a blessing in our life. God instituted the Sabbath, this day of rest, from the very beginning. Genesis 1, it says for 6 days, God created everything. He created the heavens, the earth, the water, trees, sky, the picnic we're about to have on the grass. God creates all of it. Then on the seventh day, it says God rested. And God didn't rest because he was tired. God's not like me who needs a nap every day. God didn't need a nap. God rested because what he was doing was modeling and instituting this way of life that we're meant to live. That we're meant to live in this beautiful rhythm of work and rest in our life. That's what it's meant to look like. We're meant to operate at our best when we are living in a healthy rhythm of work and rest. Work is a part of our life. Sorry for those of you who hate your jobs. Work is a part of our life. We're supposed to work. We're supposed to take pride in our work, meaning we're supposed to do it well. We're supposed to care about it. We're supposed to be good stewards. We want to be excellent with the things we're doing, right? We want to have integrity and honor with it. So work is important. But work was never meant to consume us. Work was never meant to become our identity. Work was never meant to cause us frustration and anger and anxiousness, and our whole world revolves around work. That was never the purpose of work. And yet for so many of us, that's what work becomes. It becomes everything we think about and everything we talk about, and our entire life and identity is our work and our title and our role. And how we resist that, how we push back from entering into those spaces is through rest. Is that we live in a healthy rhythm of work and rest. Work matters, but we put work in its appropriate box, and we operate in this other rhythm. That's what the Sabbath was meant to be, this blessing for the people. And when we operate in that way, when we enjoy the Sabbath, we remember that the reason we can rest is because our God is always at work. The reason that we rest is because God gives us this gift and this reminder that he is in control and we are not. And when we rest, we enjoy the world that God created. We enjoy his creation. We pay attention to the world around us because God desires for us to enjoy our lives here on earth. Now, that doesn't mean there's not pain and hardships, but God's desire is that we would enjoy this. That's the Sabbath. Beautiful thing, right? And yet when we get to the time of Jesus with these Pharisees, they had no understanding of anything I just said. The Sabbath to them was another thing that they had to do right, and it was a bunch of things that they shouldn't mess up on, and here's hundreds of rules of what to do and not do in the Sabbath, right? Here's all these things that work means, so don't do any of these things. And so for the people, is the Sabbath a blessing? No. It's a huge burden, and don't mess up, and don't do all these wrong things, and don't work, and this is what work means, and here's all the tangents of what work could be. And so when you get to that idea, this is just showing this picture of how far the Pharisees and religious leaders had separated God and his heart from the things they were doing. So that was Jesus' first issue with the religious leaders. The second issue is they kept adding all these rules and regulations, but they did this little sneaky thing that every time they added a rule, guess who was doing it well? They were. Oh, so they're the ones that are doing it well. They're the ones that are doing it best. And that means we're doing it worse. So what does it do? It continues to elevate their status and their reputation. We are the experts. We're the best ones. And instead of using their influence, their power as a means to lift others up and to serve those around them, these religious leaders use their power as a means to elevate themselves and hold others down. Because the more you hold others down, the wider the gap between you and them. And they surrounded themselves with other people that could prop them up and give them more influence and power and money. So Jesus is looking at all of that and is like, wow, you guys are way off base. So Jesus had massive issues with the Pharisees. And the Pharisees had issues with Jesus because he was calling them out. because he was exposing their hypocrisy. Because every time he would be around them, he's like, you are missing the mark. You're doing this the wrong way. He was unraveling their entire systems that they had built. And so they did not like Jesus. He was disrupting their way of life. He was threatening to disrupt their power that they've accumulated. He's threatening to disrupt all of their finances and all the things they were doing. So they didn't like Jesus, and they began to plot to get rid of this guy that is causing us all this issue. And so it is no coincidence that this dinner invitation from this religious leader comes to Jesus on the Sabbath, and they prop this guy in front of him, this poor person who's suffering, and they're all watching to see what Jesus is going to do. Because they're wondering, Jesus, are you going to heal this person? Because if you heal this person, well, you just worked on the Sabbath maybe, right? And we can use that as a means to accuse you. So that's all what's happening in the background of this weird, awkward dinner that we find ourselves in. So it says, there in front of him was a man suffering abnormal swelling of his body. So Jesus asked the Pharisees and the experts of the law, hey, you guys know everything. You're the best at all these things. So let me ask you a question. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? Is this breaking the Sabbath for me to heal somebody, for me to show mercy and compassion to somebody who's hurting? Is that against God's view of the Sabbath? But they remained silent. So taking a hold of the man, he healed him and sent him on his way. And then Jesus asked the second question. If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out? And they had nothing to say. Because Jesus knows the answer, and that's why they're not responding. He knows that if someone they loved was suffering, if someone they loved and cared about was hurting, if somebody they loved fell in a well, which is a weird thing. Do you remember baby Jessica who fell in a well? When, I don't know, I'm looking, at this group of people who are with me. This was like a thing in the 80s. This child fell in a well. It dominated local news for a long, long time. Baby Jessica, look it up. I think she's fine now. But if you had somebody you loved that fell into a well, would you not get that person out? Would you not seek to care for somebody that is suffering that matters to you? You would. And in fact, you would have me get involved. Jesus, help this person that I care about who's suffering. So it's not about the healing on the Sabbath. And then he talks about an ox, which might seem like a strange turn, but an ox represents finance. It's their money. It's a part of their livelihood. The ox would work the fields. And so this thing is connected to their pocketbooks. And so Jesus is saying, okay, let's get rid of somebody you care about and love. Obviously, you'd help them. What about something that's going to impact your finances? What is something that's going to get in the way of maybe you earning money and may cause some disruption in that? Would you not get involved then? Obviously, you would. And so your issue, the real issue you have is not me healing on the Sabbath, because there's nothing in Scripture or God's commands that said we're not supposed to show mercy and compassion and care to somebody in front of us who's suffering. That is 100% aligned with God's heart. Your issue with me isn't healing on the Sabbath. It's I'm healing somebody that you don't care about. I'm healing someone that has no value to you. That's the issue. Remember, this conversation is about what is your view of yourself and what is your view and your value of the other. They brought this man in. He was a prop. Could you imagine this guy? He's in the prominent house of a religious leader. Jesus, his disciples, all these people. This was like a big meal. And they dragged this poor guy in who's suffering to see what Jesus would do. That was their view of him. He's a prop to trap Jesus. And Jesus says, your problem with me isn't that I'm healing on the Sabbath. It's that your view and your value of others is so low. And he's questioning them. What metric do you use to administer compassion to those who are hurting? Because obviously that guy doesn't check your box. They had nothing to say. Verse 7, when he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. And I want to give you just a little bit of background of this, what this means. They're at this big dinner. Jesus is looking how everyone is sitting. He just got done with this conversation, exposing how little they value these other people who are suffering. And he's looking at how they're all kind of sitting around this table, and he's about to launch into this parable. And what Jesus is pressing on is this reality that back then, the culture of seating meant everything. Where you sat at church, where you sit at an event, where you sat at a wedding, where you sat at a big party, where you sat told everyone everything about your status and how much honor and how much regard you have, right? And the rule was whoever's in charge The people that sat closest to him were the most important people. So everyone wanted to sit and be by the person that was most important, right? And so Jesus is looking at them all jockeying for positions, and he's about to call them out again, saying, you are way more concerned with where you're sitting and how close to power you are than paying attention to what's happening around you. And the seating culture was really important then. It's still true for us today. If you've ever been to, a fancy dinner with a bunch of people, you want to be at the cool kids table, right? Like we all know what that feels like. We want to be at the right table. If you've ever gone to a work dinner with a bunch of people, the boss's table is usually surrounded by all the most important people. If you're like me, you want to be far from that table so you don't have to be on the whole night, But yes, you want to be at the boss's table. I mean, weddings are the epitome of this for us, right? If you ever gone to a wedding and found yourself at the kids' table, I have, as an adult, I worked in the youth group, so they're like, oh, you want to hang out with 17-year-olds as a 30-year-old man? And I'm like, what is happening right now? Why am I at the kids' table? Or you're at the other weird table trying to make small talk with Aunt Sue, who you just met, and yet all your friends are way over there, and you're like, why am I not at that table? Weddings are the place where this happens in so many different ways for us, right? If you've ever planned a wedding in your life or been to a wedding, there's all the dynamics of who's the best man and who's the other good man and who's the groomsman and who are the ushers, and there's all these politics of that. When I was 21 and graduating college, for some reason, so many of my friends in college and the guys I grew up with started getting married. It was very strange, but I went to like a dozen weddings in those first 2 or 3 years out of college. And there was a number of weddings I was in. I was a groomsman, great. And then there's some weddings I was a part of, and I was an usher. And it was like, oh, I still got to get a tux, so that's not cheap. I've got to put that tux on. I've got to show up early. I've got to show people where their seat is, which is it's right there. Like there's no mystery of seats. These are not packed out weddings, right? It's just like this. It's like, go sit there. And I'm like, what am I doing as an usher? And the straw that broke the camel's back for me is one time I was the wedding book attendant. Is that a phrase? I'm not making fun of you if you had the book at your wedding where people walked in and signed the book. Raise your hand. Did you have that book at your wedding when people walked in, they signed it? Natalie, when's the last time you opened that book and were like, oh, Joe was at my wedding? Did I? Because I usually don't sign those. So God bless you. If you have that book, I hope in 20 years you'll open that book and see random names there. Maybe one of those people will be famous. Is that the point? If somebody breaks it, now you have their signature? But I was the attendant. I'm standing there, and I'm like, am I supposed to just watch these people sign a book? I think my job was to make sure no one walked off with a pen, because if you lose the pen, this whole system unravels. And so that was the moment that I began to have this conversation with friends of mine that got engaged. This is going to start by me sounding really good, but you know me, so you know this is going to end with me sounding terrible. But I started having this conversation with friends that got engaged. I'm like, look, if you want me to be a groomsman in your wedding, I would be so honored. That would be great. That would mean a lot. That's awesome. But if you don't want me to be a groomsman, I'm great. You're not going to offend me. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I know all the chaos with it. Like, I'm good. I'm not bothered at all if I'm not a groomsman. See, right? I'm a good guy. I'm releasing them from any pressure or guilt. The reason I'm having this conversation was part 2 of the conversation, which was, but if I'm not a groomsman, don't make me anything. I don't want to be an usher. I don't want to have any role whatsoever. Just release me away from that. I just want to come and hang out. And I'm a terrible person, and I wish I wasn't proud of this, but I am, because it worked. I got to a point where I was either a groomsman or I could just come and hang out and be the wedding guy. Think of all of those dynamics that you all have experienced in this, the seating culture that you've had to navigate in your life. And now multiply that by 10-fold, 20-fold, 50-fold, and that was the reality of this culture. Where you sat mattered. If you were moved slightly this way, that is an act of offense and integrity. Is this me? Is it all me? Oh, Memorial Day interference. Thanks, Zale. And all of that is going on, and Jesus has just got done talking about and exposing how little they value other people. Now he's looking at how they value themselves. They're jockeying for a position, so he tells this parable connected to a wedding. He said, when someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this person your seat. Then humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, 'Friend, move up to a better place.' Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." Jesus tells this parable, and you can tell with some of his parables, they're meant to be a little tongue in cheek, right? They're meant to kind of push us to extremes. At times, they're meant to be sarcastic. At times, they're meant to be a little funny. And so he tells this story and gives two different versions of a person, two different postures we can have as a person. He said there's a person that's going to walk in the room, and they walk in believing they are the most important person in this room. I'm the most popular, I'm the smartest, I'm the most important. They enter every room believing that. And it's not enough that they have some authority and power. This is the person that wants everyone to know that they have authority and power, right? And that person is going to walk into a wedding feast, and they're the person that's going to grab their plate and go to the head table, and they're going to go, "Bride move, groom move, I'm sitting right here, dead center. This is where I belong." This is the mindset of a certain type of person, Jesus is saying, that they believe they belong, that they are valued, that they're the best person in this room and they deserve the best. And again, Jesus uses this extreme example, and it's easy for us to be, obviously, we would never do that. We're way better than that. But there are parts of that that can connect to our lives. There's parts of us that it feels good to be important, right? Is it just me? Or it's nice to have a VIP experience somewhere, right? Or a backstage pass to something. That feels good, right? Or is it just me? It's nice to be the person when you travel and you see the huge line at Avis Rental Car and you are a preferred member and you bypass that line and you're like, "See you people, my keys are in the car and I'm driving off," right? That feels good to have status there. It's good to be a Delta Gold Medallion person. Maybe you'll get upgraded to Comfort Plus, or maybe you'll get first class. And what's so funny, at least for me, is the minute you get into that seat in first class, within 5 minutes, "Oh, I belong here, and what are you guys all doing here in my area?" I mean, it turns so quickly. We all like status, right? It feels good to feel important, to feel wanted. What Jesus is warning us of is what happens when our identities start becoming tied to status. And it's not just that you want the best seat, it's you need the best seat because that's who you are and it's your identity and it's how you function. That's everything about you. This is what Jesus is warning. When our status, our need to feel and be important is so deeply connected to our identities. Because the minute we are so focused on ourselves and where we belong, we take our eyes off of everyone else around us. And then Jesus contrasts that with a different type of person. He says there's the other person who's not concerned where they're sitting. They're not concerned what seat they have. They're just happy to be invited to the party. They're just happy to be there, and they're there to hang out, and they're there to pay attention to other people. It doesn't matter where they sit, right? They're not self-focused. They're other-focused. And now they're open to paying attention and noticing those around them. Jesus says there's a different type of person that acts with humility, that doesn't seek to look at themselves and isn't so obsessed with where am I at and am I in the right spot and do people know I'm important and do I wear the right clothes and have the right things. There's a person that operates with humility. And no longer are they concerned with themselves, but they're open to being concerned for others. And Jesus is saying, what would this posture look like in your lives? What would it look like in our lives if we stopped valuing ourselves so highly and we began to value others significantly? And he ends this parable by telling this story. And he says, and again, Jesus is about to go to the extreme, but he's doing it for a good reason. He's saying, what would it look like for your life not to be so focused on yourself and all the things going on with you? What would your party look like? What would your dinner table look like if you took a moment to think about others? And so Jesus says to the host, this prominent religious leader, Jesus looks at him and says, when you give a luncheon, hey, the next time you do something like this, when you give a dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid, meaning your motivation is, I'm going to get something in return. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Meaning God sees what you're doing, God sees your heart, God sees how you're operating. And the first part of that, Jesus is saying, don't just do things for people that can repay you. Now, this is not a formula because we can get to that mindset, oh, I'm supposed to take the worst seat all the time, so I'm going to get the worst seat. Jesus, it's not about where you're sitting. It's about the condition of your heart. This is not permission not to invite your relatives or your brothers and sisters to your Memorial Day barbecue. That's not what Jesus is saying. But he's saying be wary of a mindset where you begin seeing other people in regards of what can I get out of this person? Who are the easy people? Who are the hard people? What can I get in return? And none of us would admit we ever do this, but if you just think for a moment, and I've been guilty of this, if you think for a moment, are there people in your life that you stay connected to because they kind of have something to offer? Like there's that friend of yours, and the only reason you text them is because, oh, they know somebody that works for the Dodgers, so you can get good tickets here and there, and that's really the only reason I talk to this person, but I want to keep them in my life. I only talk to that person because they throw the best parties with all the cool people, so I want to make sure I get invited, so I'm going to stay really deeply connected to that person. Do I like them? No, but that's the reason I'm doing it, my motivation, that there's something back for me. We only meet that couple for dinner a couple times a year because they may help my kid get into the school that I want them to go to, so we need to kind of keep them close. And we all can be guilty of this to some degree, that we begin viewing people not with a mindset of how can I serve you, but what can I get back from you? And the minute we begin doing that, we become self-focused and we begin to use metrics in evaluating those around us. What I love about this is Jesus begins describing his table. I want to invite the worship band back up. Jesus starts describing his table, the type of tables and spaces that he creates in his life. And his table is full of the blind, the beggars, the poor, the hurting. We see it again and again in his life and his ministry. Jesus surrounding himself with people that you would not expect, people that the rest of the world has left behind, people that are seen as not having any value. Jesus brings them and says, you have infinite value with me and in my kingdom. And he begins to give us a picture of that and what he's pressing us on this morning as we consider what is our value of ourselves, how do we view ourselves, how do we view and value other people. As we consider and hold those things in our hands, the question that Jesus is asking is, what does your table look like? Is your table full of the easy people who are, always fun, no drama, they invite you back, this is all the people I want to be around me? Is that your table? Is your table full of those people? And that's okay. We want to be around people that are easy, right? That's not to condemn us for that. But Jesus is saying, are you creating space for others? Are you seeking to invite others that no one invites? Are you seeking to invite others who might be hard? And they may be the draining people, but guess what? They need someone in the same way that you need someone. By the way, you're draining to someone, right? We're not perfect. There are people in our life that are like, here comes Amen again, and he's going to wear me out. Let's not be naive. Who are those that are at our table that need to be invited? Jesus just gave us this picture of who belongs and who is overlooked time and time again. And for us in this even small community, this church that we've been a part of for the last few months, and some of you are here for the first time, and we are trying to function like this. We're trying to be people that create space for others. And for some of you that have been coming for some time now, I would ask that question, who are you inviting to your tables? Some of you have been coming for months. It's a small group. We all know each other. Who are you making space for? Who in this room needs to be invited that you haven't reached out to yet? Who are you making assumptions that, I'm sure they're fine, they don't want to hang out with me? How are we doing that amongst this community? How are we here creating space for others that need to be seen and known? We say every single week, and I say it funny because I don't want to be that guy, but we start church at 9:30. We start church at 9:30 because we want to create space on Sunday mornings for that opportunity, for you to come and connect and get to know others. Guess what? It's not about you. It's about who needs to connect, who needs to talk, who needs to share something. This is the type of community that we want to form. And I'm saying all this in this way because here's what I know. It starts here. Because if we can't do that well here, we're not going to do it well out there. It's impossible to try to live that out in a city that's hard and messy and broken and hurting. So it begins in these very small rooms. It begins in our very small communities. It begins in our neighborhoods. It begins amongst our family. What does your table look like? Do you have space for others, or are you too full? Let's continue worshiping. Let's process and continue considering. What might Jesus be calling you to?